Well, so Peter from the Bible, Peter was not where the first church was started at all. No, it's not who it was handed down to. So that's, the Catholic Church is wrong there, huh? Yeah, the Catholic Church, I've said for a while now, for being, the Holy See, they seem to get so many things wrong, just saying. But anyway, no, it was handed down to Jesus's biological brother, James. I've been listening to this book called The Jesus Dynasty, and there's a couple things that it mentioned at near the end of it, the last chapter, was basically talking about, that in the Gospel of Thomas, which isn't in the Bible, but it relates to Acts, but when they canonized it, I don't know if they changed it, or I guess that's why the very last line of the Bible is God says, do not add or take away from this. I fear anybody that's done that. But in Acts, I forget the verse, but you can look up the Jesus Dynasty. It was written in 2006, by the way. In the Jesus Dynasty, it says that Jesus tells them, no, everything is being handed down to James, my brother. And then later in Acts, it talks about how one of the apostles says, I'm going to see James, Jesus's brother. So he's actually the one that carries it on. So obviously he had children. So who were his descendants, and who were their descendants, and who, you see where I'm going? I'm sure that they possibly still live on today in some family line. I would imagine. I mean, I don't know. And that makes more sense that it would be because James was at the cross. Now, the Catholic Church and others, because, this is what happens when you get experts involved. They're too obsessed with, we want to control people, so let's not really tell them the truth. Let's kind of, change it, or else they're just plain stupid, okay? But it makes sense. That's who Jesus would pass it on to. That was his half-brother. Half-brother, because it was part Holy Spirit and part Mary. So anyway, so that's what that says in the Jesus Dynasty. And so I've been saying since 2020, and I don't know why I've been saying, I just know it, is that the way this, and I can't relate it to anything except that it's what will make sense, is that God is going to flip tables, but he's going to flip it on a mass scale. Okay? So it goes back to where I forget what section of the Bible it's in when Jesus is woeing them, and he says they've been given their reward. They've been given their reward, because you know how Jesus talks about that your rewards will be based on your deeds. So he says to the Pharisees, trust me, they've been given their rewards. So they were given good, they were given power, they were given wealth, and most have not, at least in this day and age, most, not all, but most have not done good with it. So what happens is they lose it. So they can go and hide it in some, bank account overseas. It's not going to matter, because when God flips it, it's going to be gone. They'll have nothing. It'll just be removed from them, which makes sense, because that's why Jesus was telling the Pharisees and others that, no, you've already received your reward. You were given wealth, you were given power, you were given prestige for a reason. You were meant to do good with it, but most of you, what you have done is turned into animals and monsters at the World Economic Forum. You're running the healthcare system. You're totally disgusting. You're the wealthiest people in the world, and you have hoarded your wealth. You have turned into animals and monsters. So you have been given your reward, and you have failed miserably. So that reward, since it all belongs to God, really it does. No matter how much they think it belongs to them, nope, belongs to God. That will be transferred over to the people that have shown that they had the deeds based on their deeds, and they will repair things. Mm-hmm. You may not believe, you don't have to believe that. They wouldn't. but they really should, because when it hits them that they're walking, they'll be, I would imagine many of them would commit suicide. How would they live? Because they're so used to that power and money. But God does give that stuff, but he gives it with the condition that you have to do good with it. You can't be a World Economic Forum psychopath or big tech psychopath. Yeah, God doesn't care about your AI bullshit either. I mean, God will handle that crap. I'm just saying he will. Again, you don't have to believe that. You could say I'm crazy, but it's not looking good for any of them. They don't believe in God, so of course they wouldn't know it. But then there's been too many coincidences, yeah. So yeah, it makes more sense. James was the one that was handed the gospel, and it's in the book of Thomas that it was to go on to James. And and then the reason I came across this was because, as I was saying, I was listening to this book called the Jesus Dynasty, and they talked about this. The Gospel of Q. The Jesus Dynasty that I was listening to was written in 2006. 2006. And it was mentioned in that book. So I'm just saying, I did not follow this letter. I didn't. I only found out about it in 2019. So I couldn't make heads and tails of it because it was just drops, right? Or posts. You had to be somebody that had followed it. I think it's gone off the rails in so many directions, though, too. So it's hard to keep. I can't keep track of any of it. But anyway, putting that aside. But this is a real thing. Yeah. So what this is decades before our earliest preserved Gospels were first penned, the things Jesus said and did were passed down by word of mouth among his followers. However, by carefully comparing Matthew, Mark, and Luke, biblical scholars have discerned a written source even earlier than these texts, the gospel commonly known as Q, from the German word which means source, written in Greek sometime between 50 and 70 CE. This collection of Jesus' teachings was used by the authors of Matthew and Luke. Following the meticulous reconstruction of Q by an international team, this new translation highlights the wisdom of Jesus' prophetic message, the gospel behind the gospels. So it's just what the things Jesus said. And here's some of what he said, right? He looked up at his disciples and said, "Blessed are you who are poor, because yours is God's reign. Blessed are you who are hungry, because you will be full. Blessed are you who mourn, because you'll be comforted. Blessed are you when they criticize you, persecute you, and spread lies about you, because," and I can't see all of it because of the recording. So this is why, it says in the Bible that if you are blessed with wealth and those positions, their responsibility is to do good by it, and they don't. They don't. Most people don't, because they let it go to their head. Then they convince themselves that God doesn't exist. And they don't realize that, no, you were given that wealth by God with the expectation that you would be an honorable person. So they have been given plenty of time to try to be honorable people. They are not. They are only interested in protecting themselves. As I've said, the hospital system, I see these wealthy administrators. These people are disgusting. I cannot stand them. They're reprobates. They're just worms. Every CEO in this country, as far as I'm concerned, in healthcare is a reprobate mind. So that's what's going to happen. Yeah. There's a reason Jesus flipped the tables in the temple, because that's what God's going to do to all their bank accounts, everything that they're in power of. All of it will be lost. That may seem hard to believe, but when it comes to God, you should see that that's not at all. That's totally possible and likely true, because, I mean, how many more coincidences do you need? I mean, obviously, whoever's behind Q, I don't know, but knew to use this letter, and I never followed it, so I don't know. But everybody's heard of Q, so And yet then and that book I listened to, it was written in 2006 and talked about the Q gospel. That's too many coincidences.